Friday afternoon, just about 1:10, 15th of December, 2023. I believe I got all of that information correct. Going to do a short talk. Questions are always welcome if anyone pops up and has one. And my new friend Paradox had a question. Not so much a question as an interest in what brought me towards this place, what brought me towards what we could say a spiritual journey. Certain words and phrases I have a tendency to have a natural aversion to, like spiritual. What's spiritual? In a sense, you look at anything that's material and you can see it as spiritual in essence because it's not solid, but it has the appearance of solid. That includes the body. And then what's a spiritual thought? Ethereal, passing. It's not lasting. So what actually is spiritual? The actions that you take, meditation, breath work, yoga, commitment to compassionate living, is that spiritual? I'm not going to say it is, because why are you drawn to it? Who knows? It's a mystery. That's what spiritual is, accepting the mystery. Sometimes we're drawn to certain things. For whatever reason, from a young age, our friend Osiris is here. Hey Derek, how are you? For whatever reason, at an extremely young age, I was drawn towards weird stuff. Although I didn't know it was weird stuff. For me, it was natural. It seemed like in hindsight, a very mystical childhood where things danced, mystery danced. Everything was fascinating. Everything was, I was full of curiosity for the world and didn't really seek explanation so much as just wanting to explore. And that's been the theme to my so-called spiritual life. You think in terms of being a seeker. Every seeker that I know had this burning desire to know an absolute truth. And I never had that. I've never had any burning desire to know something. Because it seemed to me that as soon as I knew something, I put a limit on it. I didn't really know it. I just had a better description than somebody else tried to give me before. So it always seemed better to simply live in that mystery, not knowing and accepting that I didn't know. And instead of being a seeker, if I had to give it a label, I would say explore. It's more fun to explore than it is to seek, because seek has that energy. You gotta get someplace. You're not there yet. As an explorer, man, you're in the midst of it. You're in the thick of it. There's no place to be but right here, and right here is so full of mystery and wonder. Why would you want to be anywhere else? And I went to a Catholic school. That does two things. It opens you up to mystery, and it shuts you down just as quickly. It tells you there's a God, and says there's no way to get to God until you're dead. And you have to go through some certain steps before you can get there. You have to be baptized. You have to be confirmed. You have to obey these certain rules. There's no way to get to God. And at the same time, we had Christian mystics who couldn't be spoken of in Mass, but were speaking a truth, like St. Catherine of Siena. All the way to heaven is heaven. Meister Eckhart, the eye in which I see God is the same eye in which God sees me. Those people were speaking my language, but I didn't know it yet. No one told me them until later in life. Derek says, a long time ago, I was asked a question by a friend, would you rather know the truth or be happy? I have carried that question with me my whole life. It's an interesting question. But who has the truth? Who's going to give us that truth? It reminds me of when UJ Krishnamurti visited Ramana Maharishi and asked him, do you have the truth? And Ramana said, I do, but can you take it? to which Krishnamurti didn't have an answer. And soon after that, he had his own awakening experience. And he dropped all that seeking behind after 40 plus years of seeking. And he lived the rest of his life in this crazy wisdom, joyful happiness. So, yeah, my years in Christianity did not, amazingly, didn't dampen my enthusiasm for God. And when I use, from here on out, really, when I use God, it's going to be my own definition, which is more that classical, mystical sense of God. And we could just as easily say reality or the universe, or my favorite from Richard Bach, if you guys ever read Illusions, or Jonathan Livingston Seagull, is, the great is, isness. We can say beingness, we can say presence. Doesn't matter. It's all labels. And a label itself is never the experience. Everything you're doing right now is an experience of God, because it's God experiencing itself through you, as you. Man, that takes the pressure off of seeking right there. You're here. What you've sought is right here, and has been all along. So then, from seeking, all you got to do is just explore it and wonder. Have fun. And that means everything. That means that nasty shit that happens in your life, have fun with it the best you can. That doesn't mean you're not going to suffer, because you are. Buddha said life is suffering. He taught two things: suffering and how to escape from suffering. Escape might be a strong word. As much as I love the Buddhist path, I don't think we escape from suffering. Same with yoga. The entire path of yoga is to understand suffering, to understand the role that we play, the role that our minds play in suffering, that we create suffering itself, and then to remove ourselves from that path. What I see it as, we escape psychological suffering. We escape our addiction to the suffering that we create, and that we see it all as a temporary expression. This sucks and hurts right now. It's not always going to suck, and it's not always going to hurt right now. There's going to be this all expansive now where it's going to hold something other. If we look back on the memory, can we truly hurt from a memory? We got to draw all that energy from a past experience in order to hurt now, which doesn't seem worth it, because life is going to bring you something else that's going to hurt just as bad as that previous thing. So, two things. Don't bring back that past hurt. Doesn't mean don't remember it. But drop the psychological addiction to the pain that it caused. You can do that through forgiveness. And don't project into the future of a pain that's going to come. It will. You don't know when, you don't know who's going to do it, and you don't know what it involves. Do your best. The whole live in the presence, live in now, sort of doesn't make sense, because you're already doing it, even if you don't realize it. There is no place else but here and now. Who was it? Bob Admonson, the Advaita non-duality teacher, likes to say, what's the matter with right now if you don't think about it? It's an amazing pointer. What's the matter with right now if you don't think about it? Bring that to mind your next burpee set, your next Navy SEAL session. What's wrong with this rep if you don't think about it? Yeah, it sucks. You might throw up. All kinds of bad stuff might be happening. But if you don't think about it, it's just a rep. You're just doing it. And then you're doing another one. What's wrong with the burpees? What's wrong with Navy SEALs if you don't think about it? So, yeah, Christianity. seemed to be a dead-end path for me. I wasn't very good at it anyway. Too many questions, not enough actual explanations. Although, you know what, now, after years of studying the mystical, specifically mystical Catholic traditions, it's a viable path, but you're not going to get any support by any church leader. There's a few outlets, contemplative prayer. Thomas Merton, back in his day, back in the 40s through the 60s, certainly made it a viable option for many. And amazingly, he grew closer to his concept of God through the study of Buddhism and Taoism. Specifically, for a time it was Zen, but towards the end of his life, he was given initiation by a Tibetan Buddhist Lama in Dzogchen, which is the direct access pointing, which is very same to the Douglas Harding pointing. Just clear seeing the inherent emptiness of your nature that is also the fullness of everyday life. It doesn't have to be that dichotomy. You don't realize emptiness and then live in that nihilistic, empty place. You realize emptiness and you see the beauty that it becomes form. Makes it kind of nice. Takes the sting. And nihilism is all about the sting itself. It's all about the fruitlessness of existence. So, yeah, as we were saying, I pretty much was always sort of on that spiritual, what is it? That kind of frame. And through my youth, I used to read. By this time, I started realizing, like I said at the beginning, I was always into weird stuff. I just didn't know it was weird because I had no comparison. By the time I got into middle school and high school, I knew outright for a fact that it was weird, because nobody else was reading Carlos Castaneda, Trungpa, all of that crazy wisdom stuff. And again, it wasn't because I was seeking these answers that I needed to know myself. It just fascinated me. Mysticism, shamanism, nature spirits, Celtic lore, it just felt like I belonged. It made sense. It was the world to me. You can't go out in nature and not expect to see fairies, not expect to see elves, not expect to see elementals. Still to this day, when I take a 4 a.m. walk, I expect to see all that. And who knows what form they take. I always try to tell people, don't take everything literally, and at the same time, don't doubt that it isn't literal. So, yeah, I mean, all that. I bought a book of yoga. Maybe I was 11 or so, and started teaching myself yoga, started teaching myself meditation, and I practiced it on and off all through up into my 20s when I read Paramahansa Yogananda's autobiography of a yogi, and that was pretty much it. I was a yogi. I was hooked. I lived my life from that, mostly imperfectly, and for a long time, as I've mentioned before, as a drunk. Didn't start out as a drunk. I just started out as a drinker. I always tell people that I was a social drinker, but I found every single occasion in the world to be sociable. It's Monday, social Monday. Tuesday, even more social Tuesday. Everything, every occasion. Always a happy hour. I didn't think of it as a problem because I was having a good time. And everybody around me was having a good time. And everyone around me was supporting me having a good time. Then I started looking around and realizing that, you know what? They weren't so much supporting me as we were all using each other as props to our misery. props to the fact that we were masking something by drinking so much. And sooner or later, I'd have to break out of it. We all would, hopefully. Unfortunately, it was after damaging a meaningful relationship. It was after wrecking one too many cars. It was after endangering the lives of countless innocent people because of my stupidity. And fortunately, no one ever got hurt. Amazingly, too, I still trained every single day. We would do our squats and we would have the trash can next to the squat rack because we knew what was going to happen. Fortunately, we would also have really big bench press days, and there'd be like 6 of us rotating, and we'd sit for 15 minutes before our next set came along, so that never took too much out of us, but it was still a workout. In an instant, one evening, after seeing sirens behind me, getting pulled over by an off-duty state trooper without even having that much to drink. And by that I mean I had drank and drove in far worse conditions. This was rather light night for me. And I got pulled over and I saw the lights and I had the realization that if I wanted to, at this moment, I never had to take another drink again. That I was done. And I got off very easy. I still got a DUI, but I didn't lose my license. Nothing. I had probation for, it was a couple months. I don't know why it was so late, but it was. I was prepared for much worse. At the same time, there was this huge wave of thankfulness. I was done, reborn. And seriously, that's the way it was. That I just went from a drinker to a non-drinker in an instant. I didn't stand up on the soapbox and announce to my friends, I'm done. I didn't go to meetings. For a little bit, I went to a couple thinking that I could replace my social life of drinking with the social life of going to meetings, but I quickly realized it was not for me. Some people are better suited for that, and if it helps, by all means, go to meetings. Do the 90 and 90 meetings in 90 days, whatever it takes. Bill W., founder of AA, believed that everyone needed some type of mystical experience in order to quit drinking. They needed to have an epiphany, needed to have an awakening. He did. And he believed later in the 1950s that LSD would be a helpful means of bringing about that type of awakening to get you to quit drinking. And of course, that was pretty controversial at the time, and he had to step back. It reminds me of all the Christian mystics that had to recant on their experiences with God. I know personally that psychotropic substances helped me quite a bit in the 80s, not to mention giving me a really good time at countless Grateful Dead shows. And never ever discount the benefits of joy, of dancing to really good music in a hippie crowd that doesn't care what you look like when you dance. So again, if to me it was an epiphany, and I was fortunate that it happened and that I got to live my life afterwards in that epiphany. In that moment, my meditation practice deepened. It was inconsistent up until then. Would meditate in streaks. The very next day after pulled over, I gained a consistency with my practice that never stopped. I gained a consistency with my writing that never stopped. I started writing every single day. Before I had that tortured poet sense that you write when you're inspired and then you live in misery when you're not inspired, and you spend more of the time uninspired than inspired. Inspiration was a gift that was very fickle. It could come to you and it could go away, and then you suffered in its absence, which is ridiculous because inspiration is everything, everywhere. You can't escape it. You can look out your window, you can look at your desk, you can look at your fingers, you can marvel at the fact that you consist of cells in constant communication with each other. Cells that are constantly communicating just to be a finger. And that in each of those cells there's molecules, and in each of those molecules there's atoms, and then there's particles, and then between that particles, absolute nothingness that somehow has this presence that draws those particles, whispering, hey, let's be a finger. Why? Why be my finger? Of all the wonderful things particles could be, why be my finger? And yet, the mystery of the universe, hey, here's my finger. There's something to write about right there. How could I ever not be inspired? This finger is going to touch my keyboard, which is as empty as my finger, in essence. And yet somehow, thoughts are going to appear. Some of them might make sense. I might write them down, and I might look at it and think, it's a singular line of beauty. If the rest of the stuff I write is pure garbage, I have this one line that is just perfect to me. And everything that I do from this moment on for the rest of the day is perfect. So, my writing, my meditation, relationships righted themselves in some ways. Apologies were made, of course. Amends were made. Relationships that weren't to be fell away. The right person came into my life. Things aligned. Suffering still happened. I went through a divorce, lost both my parents. I've lost beloved pets. But everything worked out perfectly. Because it couldn't have been any other way. If they could have been, hey, I would have done it. I'd be in a different place right now. That's the way they were. I'm okay with it all. So I got a divorce, and somehow, magically, mysteriously, in the most important ways of all, I'm still with my ex-wife. Who knows how life's going to work? Trust the process. Forget who it was. Richard Bach, again. That in the end, everything will be okay. And if it's not okay, it's not the end. A lot of wisdom in Richard Bach. One of my favorite authors. Don't know if he's still writing or not. I know he suffered a horrible plane accident in his 80s. He was a big fan of biplanes that he would fly on his own. So, brings me here to this day. It's just been a continuation of where I was at the very beginning, and then an even greater continuation from that epiphany of being reborn in a different life. And with that, I think we'll call it a day. I want this short enough so that if anyone is interested in that story, they can watch it without thinking, man, I got to go through an entire hour of this guy talking about this stuff. This way, hey, it's almost at 25 minutes. You only have to suffer through 25 minutes of me babbling on. It's not a bad deal. Osiris says, good talk. Thank you, Derek. I appreciate that very much. So with that, let's call it a day, guys. And I'll see you tomorrow morning for some burpees. I think it's going to be supercharged session. Might be a breathing burpee session. Who knows? I know for sure it's not going to be a Navy SEAL session. 2 days in a row of Navy SEALs. You know, I might talk about some weird stuff. I might do some crazy stuff. 2 days of Navy SEALs in a row. Not that crazy. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Take care and have a good weekend.